Episode number 223, Using Print Design to Create a Worshipful Atmosphere with Lee Snow and Will Gann. Part 1. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. This is the definitive podcast for those who plan, create, and execute worship experiences in churches all around the world. So if you touch the worship experience in any way, shape, or form, whether that's first impressions, guest services, worship, production, teaching, anything like that, if you plan, create, execute, touch the worship experience in any way, you are welcome here. This is the place for you. This is your home. We are your guide, so thank you so much for being here. We don't have all the answers, but we're on the journey with you, trying to find the answers to make our worship service, our worship experiences incredible. Why? Because we want to see people meet Jesus and take their next step with Him. We want to see life change in our churches. So I want you to remember that. It's not all about pushing the button the right way. We're not going to end the day and the service be exactly flawless, and that's the reason that we do it. No. We are creating an incredible worship experience so that people will love God and love people. We want to see life change happen in your worship experiences. So our name, 1230 Media, all comes from Mark 12:30. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is, he talks about loving God and loving people. And that's at the end of the day what we want. We want to see people's lives changed so that they can love God and love people with everything they are. Okay? So that is our why. That's why you are transforming your worship experience. Okay? A couple of weeks ago, I had the honor and privilege of being with several hundred worship leaders from across the state of South Carolina at the South Carolina Baptist Convention's Onward one-day conference, as well as their annual meeting. It was a pleasure meeting so many great worship leaders. If you were there, thank you so much for coming up to our booth. Thank you for coming to our workshop and for hanging out. If I saw you at the annual meeting, thank you so much for engaging with me, coming up and chatting with me. I really, really loved getting to know you guys. We have several conferences that we'll be at next year, so if you are where we are, please come by and say, hey, we love meeting you in person. And honestly, we love to pray for you. We love to get your name. We love to get your information, and we really do get back in touch with you, whether that is through text message or phone or email or something to encourage you in what you're doing. We want to come alongside you. All right, Thanksgiving and Christmas are coming fast, guys. It's coming like a freight train, and we want to help you this season by providing ready-made and custom media content and training to help you tell your story at your church. Our ready-made media is steak quality media content on a fast food budget. If you're looking for some ready-made media content for Thanksgiving and Christmas, just go to 1230.media/Thanksgiving or /Christmas. You'll see dozens of mini movies, coordinated service packs, full series boxes. So our boxes come with everything graphically and visually on the video side that you're going to need for a series at your church. We have Thanksgiving series, we have Christmas series boxes that you can easily do a 1 week, a 4 week series, and all that stuff is already made for you. Our boxes are only $59. And our Go Unlimited plan is less than the cost of one box. It's only $49. So if you're looking for steak quality media content on a fast food budget, this is the place to go. We want to be there to help you. We want to get our prices as low as we possibly can so that you can have what you need to transform your worship experience. 1230.media/Thanksgiving for Thanksgiving stuff, then /Christmas for Christmas stuff. You can also use the code LOCALCHURCH for $5 off anything in the library. Code LOCALCHURCH, all one word, for $5 off anything. 1230.media is the website to go to. All right, today on the show, we're going to be talking about print design in your worship experience. Here's what we mean. The printed handout pieces that you use in your worship experience. So should we even use handouts? What should they look like? What's on them? Is less information better? How do bulletins and handouts help move people to their next step in our worship experiences? Those questions and more will be answered this week and next week. So here's what we've done. I've interviewed two guys on this same topic. In fact, I've asked them some of the same exact questions to each other. Lee Snow from Warm Springs Road Church of Christ in Columbus, Georgia, will be joining me this week. He is a pastor of a church of under 100 people in weekly attendance. That's the average size church across America, okay, is less than 100 people. I've also interviewed Will Gann, who is the communications director at Bayside Community Church in Bradenton, Florida. Now, this is a multi-site church with over 10,000 people in weekly attendance. Okay, so we'll hear from Lee this week and then Will Gann next week on the show. But I want you to hear from both, from a church with about 100 people in regular attendance and then a church of over 10,000 in regular attendance. Why? Because I want you to see how each church uses print materials in their worship experience. So I'm really excited for you to see that contrast and also the overlap of what both guys do to engage their congregations at their church using printed material, using the handouts, bulletins, worship guides, those sorts of things. All right? We'll jump right into my interview with Lee Snow right after this. Check this out. Hey guys, I want to tell you about a book that I've put together called The Ultimate Production Team Handbook. This handbook is the definitive companion resource for the volunteer media team at your church. It comes packed with documents and training materials that will give you a massive jump start in creating your own manual for your media production team. It includes organizational charts, volunteer job descriptions, training guides, checklists, team lists, scheduling templates, and more. You can take the material and easily adapt it to your team. We even give you permission to edit and produce as many copies of the documents that you may need at your church. I've given you everything that you need to build your own volunteer handbook for your team. And I want you to pick up a copy today at 1230.media/books. That's 1230.media/books. Hey guys, today I welcome to the podcast a new friend of mine I met at Design Revival a couple of months ago in Columbus, Georgia. Graphic designer and pastor at Warm Springs Road Church of Christ. Lee Snow is in the house. Lee, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out, dude.
How's it going? Thanks for having me. I appreciate you, what you do on the podcast especially, but having me, you kind of dipped into the lower end, I guess, but
no, man,
it's okay.
No, see, I waited to bring in the A string. See, that's what's.
Oh, is that it?
That's what's going on.
So they come on next week, right? Okay, that's good.
No, dude, no. Well, thanks, man. Really appreciate you having on. I know we met at Design Revival in the metropolis of Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
So
it is the second largest city, so we have that.
Georgia. Yeah, dude. The venue that we were at, is the Springer Opera House, right?
Right. It is the state theater for the state of Georgia.
Dude, that place was really, really cool.
Yeah, it's I think 150 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice in there.
I felt very like Lincoln was about to be shot in the theater.
Like did you get to go in the actual theater?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's got the boxes on the side and everything.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. All right, so as we get started today, tell me a little bit about your role at your church, and also, so you kind of dual role, pastor and graphic designer. You're kind of a mix of both. So give me a little sense of your role there at the church.
Right. So I'm the only full-time on-staff person for our church. We're about 100 people or so. So a medium-sized church when you look at the overall sizes of churches, Um, but I'm the only on staff guy. We have a couple of volunteers that do different roles around the church. And then I also do freelance graphic design and things for churches on the side. But because of that, I'm also the graphic designer for our church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Awesome, man. So I said in your talk there at Design Revival, and you had a great topic, and that was using print design to create a worshipful atmosphere. So basically, your premise is print is not completely dead. We still use it, and so we want to be intentional about it. And how does that work into our worship experience? So I might have just stole your thunder, but set us up here and tell us a little
no,
bit of an overview of your talk.
so essentially, the way I look at it is, I brought this up at the beginning of the talk, but when you go to a restaurant, you expect there to be some sort of menu, whether it's on the board like at a Moe's or Barbaritos or Chipotle or something, or when you go to Olive Garden, the fancy, nice restaurants. Just kidding. Olive Garden's not a fancy, nice restaurant, but they are good. Anyways, when you sit down at a restaurant, you want a menu. Well, obviously, that would show you that print is useful in some way for some things. It is lower cost than the super high digital options that can take the place of that, but they use print for a reason. These are multi-million-dollar companies, of course. When you're graduating high school, you want to have your yearbook because you want to be able to remember those faces, right?
Yeah.
And then anytime you walk out to your road every single day, in our neighborhood, it's at 3:00 on the dot. At 3:00, Jimmy drives by in a funny looking little white truck and he puts a bunch of stuff in our mailbox, and I go out there and I look, and it may be you're pre-approved for a new vehicle, or here's a credit card offer, or something like that. All right. The reason why they send those out is because they actually work. So obviously in our culture, print is not dead. We just have to be able to use it effectively with the digital tools, and understanding that digital is great. You can do so many amazing things with it. However, when it comes to churches, print is something that we are getting away from because we want to be cool and look nice and that sort of thing. But at the same time, we're also killing ourselves because most churches don't have a ton of money. And we're trying to get all these cool new digital options to do the same things that printing can do relatively inexpensively, and get amazing work done in our local church and get communication done in our local church. So that's basically the gist of why I did the workshop, and why I spend so much time on designing and using print in our local church.
Yeah. So one thing that we'll dig into, which I really love, is it's not necessarily that we have to fill the bulletin, the worship guide with every little thing going on, but it's being intentional about what we put on those printed pieces, and that goes into our environments and spaces. So that's kind of what I want to really get into today with you. So maybe talk about how you guys use bulletins and worship guides at your church.
Yeah. So, as you said at the beginning, I preach for the Warm Springs Road Church of Christ. If you don't know what a Church of Christ is and what our concept is, essentially, our worship services are a little different than a lot of churches. We use no instruments and that sort of thing, and it can throw some people off. And so, one of our main goals in using print is to give our visitors who may have never come to a Church of Christ before an idea of, number one, what's going to happen, why is it happening, and even though it's a little odd, we want to calm them down as much as possible. And that goes for any church, right? Coming into a church for the first time, regardless of the atmosphere, is an emotionally daunting task for people. And so we want to be able to give them the tools that they need to know what's going on, to understand why it's going on, and also to be calm, right? So you can go into some churches that you walk in the front doors and there's tons of things. There's pamphlets and flyers and tracts and booklets and books and all this stuff. We want to be very specific and give them as little amount of information as possible, so that one, they aren't overwhelmed when they come in, but two, they still understand what's going on. So that's our concept. So we use bulletins for our members. We have them available. We make them to where they're not overtly, hey, here's the bulletin, grab this, because we really want our visitors to grab what we call our worship guide or our church brochure, which is that sort of information. Here's what you're looking at in worship service. Here's what's coming up. Those are printed every year, so they don't change. We don't put names and things like that. And our worship service schedule doesn't really change either. But it gives them the guide, like I said, that will give them enough information that they can confidently know what's going on, but then also be calm and know that I'm not going in this blind.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, that's basically the way that we use, especially bulletins and worship guides. Bulletins, in our opinion, are more for members or people that come regularly. Our worship guides are more for the people that may not have an understanding of what's going to happen next.
Gotcha. Okay, so you talked about three things that I want to hit on. One is to be consistent when it comes to bulletins, worship guides, and other printed pieces. So give me some thoughts on what you mean by being consistent.
So I think probably a lot of your listeners are going to be visual people for the most part. And so I explain it like this. If I grab my physical paper Bible, right, the one that I use most of the time, I'm probably not going to remember the citation where that verse is, but I can probably remember, it's on the top right corner of the page, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about consistent, especially with bulletins. We don't want things to move around very much. And so even though I redesign our bulletin every quarter with a new cover and maybe some new colors and things like that, the content stays in the same place no matter what the design looks like. Okay. Because I want them to be able, our bulletins have our prayer list in them. They have places for notes for during the message and sermon. They have events that are coming up. There's an article in there that we get from a website called House to House, Heart to Heart, that they can use throughout the week as just kind of a little study thing. If they have 10 minutes, they can read the article and maybe look up the verses. So I want those things to stay in the same place. That way, especially our older members aren't looking for things, because the design can change radically over that amount of time. But the content's still the prayer list is still going to be on the inside cover on the left-hand side. Right.
Okay, so they know where to look for it.
Right. So it's muscle memory for them. If we're in the announcements and they're mentioning a couple prayer requests, but then they say, hey, check the bulletin for the rest of the prayer requests, they know exactly where that is, regardless of what the cover or what the colors or anything like that looks like.
Got it. Okay. All right. So be consistent. What about being purposeful? So how can we make sure the content of our printed pieces have purpose and we're not just throwing everything in there?
Right. So you'll see this a lot, especially in the prayer list or in the prayer requests and things like that for churches that use those in print design. I know larger churches that becomes exponentially more difficult trying to have that in your bulletin. But for smaller churches or medium-sized churches, most of us have some sort of prayer list that's available. You'll have a prayer request from, let's say, Miss Susie, whose cousin is in the hospital, right? And she wants you to pray for her cousin. And her cousin's name is Janet. And by the way, Janet has this, and this wrong, and that's why she's in the hospital. So a lot of times that turns into an entire paragraph. And our concept is, if it can be said in 3 words, say it in 3 words. So Susie's cousin, Janet, you'll have to use last names, of course, but Susie's cousin Janet is in the hospital. That's it. If anybody needs to know more than that, they can go to Susie and say, hey, what hospital is she in? Can I go visit her? What's her phone number? What's wrong? Can we help out in this way or that way or something like that? But we want to give them just enough information to get the point across, and then they can go on farther than that. And I got that idea from a friend of mine, Alan Smith. He's the guy that ran Design Revival.
Mm-hmm.
His concept is take all of the information away until it makes absolutely no sense, and then put in just enough to where you can get the idea. And then if they need more than that, they'll go find that information.
Okay. Awesome. All right. What about being creative? So how do we have fun when designing our bulletin and worship guide?
It just boils down to play around with it and try to use these things, because a bulletin, especially a bulletin, maybe a worship guide, those things are going to change pretty regularly, right? So play around with it, be creative, mess things up a little bit every now and then. Don't change your consistency, so keep things in the same place, but try new things every now and then. And if it doesn't work, you're reprinting this next week, so it's not the end of the world, right? This isn't your sign out by the road that you have one shot to get it right. So play around with it. But also, creativity comes in when you're using things like your hierarchy or your grid, two things that you really need to know when it comes to print.
Tell me about those for a minute. Walk me through what you mean by grid and hierarchy.
Yeah, so a grid on print is when I first heard that, I'm completely self-taught over the last probably 10 years or so. When I first heard the grid, I thought it's like an equally spaced 1 inch by 1 inch grid that you lay over it, and everything has to fit into that. Essentially, your grid is based on your hierarchy. So your hierarchy is, you're going to have the most important thing that you want them to get is in your bold, big font of some sort. Okay. And then you'll have the second most important thing may not be next in line. So you may have your most hierarchical point, your most important point in big bold letters in the middle of your front cover, right? That says bulletin or welcome or something like that. The first concept that comes to mind is, well, I want them to read the next line, and we read in English, and so we go from left to right, top to bottom. So I'll need to put the second most important thing in the second line. But if you use your weights, your font weights and things, you can put that second most important thing at the top. But because the brain sees the biggest, boldest thing first, second boldest thing second, third boldest thing third, or size of your font, you can move those things around and still have your hierarchy in place. And then your grid is going to use those things, that information you want to put forward. And it's going to make it to where nothing, how do I put this? Nothing extends past your main point. So if it's welcome, I want everything to stay inside that word welcome. So I may drop down a few lines and have my third most important thing on my hierarchy right in line with the W on the left side, or the date, which is pretty important on a bulletin, especially if you're reprinting every week. I might have that at the top right-hand corner, but it's in line with the E. You want to build a grid. It doesn't have to be equal 1 inch spaces, but you want to build a grid on the page that allows everything to stay consistent. So you're not putting this over here tilted at 5 degrees and this over here and this down at the bottom. And first you have to set your hierarchy, and then your hierarchy is going to determine where everything on the grid will lay. And that's about as easy as I can make it quickly. But
Okay.
There's some amazing YouTube stuff from a guy named Will Patterson in the UK. Talks about grids a lot. So that might be an option for someone to look in more into that.
Is less content better in a bulletin worship guide? Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, it depends, right? So if it can be said in 3 words, use 3 words.
Right.
But at the same time, you have this opportunity in front of you to put information in front of your church that they need to know, right? We could very easily drop that study article that we put in our bulletin every week. However, that's something that adds to their life, right? It adds to their ability to use that bulletin, not just on Sundays, but later on. So we purposely add content in there that we wouldn't necessarily need, simply because that makes them pull that bulletin back out on a Thursday afternoon when they're sitting in their living room or something. Or it gets stuck in their pocket or something, and then
Right.
they pull it out Sunday night. So generally, less content is better, but use your content to do the how do I want to say that? Use your content to get the job done that you want to happen, right? Design itself is communication. The difference between art and design is that art can say absolutely nothing, right? I don't care what your high school poetry teacher said. Some poets write poetry, and it's not meant to say anything more than what's on the paper, right? Art can just be done. If you don't believe me, look at any abstract art. There's no meaning behind that, relatively speaking. I know some artists will put meaning behind it, but relatively speaking, art can be done just because it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Design, on the other hand, is purposeful and communicates something. So design is art, but art is not necessarily design.
So
Design is push something forward.
why does design matter when it comes to our printed pieces?
For that very reason. If we need to communicate something, then having no design elements and just throwing everything on a piece of paper. If I were to, let me use this as an example. If I were to want you to come to, say we're having a revival at our church, right? A good old-fashioned Southern revival, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I make a flyer for that has a graphic on it, and it hierarchy and grid and all that stuff, and it looks great, and it gets across the maybe the title of the messages, or who's speaking, if that matters, or where's the website where I can go find, here's the date, that sort of thing. Which are you more likely to pay attention to? That flyer, or a letter on the church's letterhead with 6 paragraphs that say, we're having a revival and here's the speaker, and it's all typed out word for word exactly what you want to say? Which are you more likely to read? The flyer.
Of
right?
course.
Right. Because design matters. You can take that information and communicate it the exact same way. You're getting across the same information, but you're using design to communicate it that allows more people to see it. Especially when we're talking about print marketing, that's really important. But also, when someone comes into your church and worship is about to start, they're probably going to show up, depending on your church, they may show up 5 minutes after it starts. But they're probably not going to want to sit in the lobby or in the foyer or even in the auditorium or sanctuary, whatever you call it, and read a bunch of information. Because you want them to get that information, but most importantly, when they're in that church building, you want them to be fellowshipping with the other people in that building.
Right.
So use design to communicate the same amount of stuff as quickly and effectively as possible so that they can have time to go and fellowship with the people around them.
Tell me about your 100% rule.
Oh yeah, for bulletins. So your churches are extremely predictable. Outside of the very rare instance where a church is just exploding and you may have 20 people today, and then next week you're going to have 100 people, and then the week after that you'll have 500 people. Outside of those very, very rare instances, your church is pretty predictable. And so if you're keeping those metrics, you're going to know how many people are in the church building, how many people are going to come to that worship service, and so forth, within a pretty small margin of error, right? So what we do is we print 75% of the attendance. So if we have 100 people, we're looking at 100 people coming on Sunday morning for worship service, we're going to print 75 bulletins. Not everyone's going to grab a bulletin, but the majority of the people are, if you're using it regularly and they know what's in it and they need that information and you're using that as an effective communication tool. Not everybody's going to grab it, but the majority of people are. So we print for 75%, and then from the pulpit, from the stage, we only announce 25% of what is in that bulletin.
Okay, so 75 on the printed page, 25% from the stage.
Right. So take however many people you think you're going to have, print 75% of that, and then take that bulletin. Only announce 25%. Don't read the entire thing. You don't need to announce that Susie's cousin is in the hospital. Maybe it may be an instance where you do, but push them toward that. So use your announcements from the stage to push them toward the printed media. So you're not wasting money, right? You want that to be used. And so find ways to push people to use that.
Yeah. Awesome, man. That's a really good, I kind of do an 80-20. I've talked about an 80-20 before, that only stuff that applies to 80% of the congregation should you announce from the stage. So very, very similar kind of thing.
Right.
So
emergencies, you'll adjust that for an emergency. If you have someone that's close to the congregation that a lot of people know in the congregation that's in the ER, you need to, that may break your rule, but overall, that's a good concept.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for sharing all this. It's great I love getting the perspective of different churches, different size churches, different denominations, and just seeing what different people are doing. So I know that this content, man, can relate to a lot of folks. A lot of times we think of what are the big churches doing? What is and look that up. But I think that we can learn from a lot of different churches as well, a lot of different folks. So I want people to do that, not just look at the Elevations and the New Springs and Church on the Moves and those, but look at others and really figure out what's best in their context for their culture. So, man, thank you so much for your time. Any parting thoughts for us?
No, just about what you were just saying. I heard a really, I had the same mindset of look at what Elevation or New Spring or, insert mega church here in South. In the South, we have this thing called Church of the Highlands. Yeah. They're a little big. They're, one day they'll get a couple of people to show up. But I had the same mentality, and he said, when is Warm Springs Road going to become Elevation? And I said, never. He said, so why are you trying to act like them?
Right.
I thought, well, yeah, that's true. Do what works best for your church. You can take ideas from these other places, but you really need to figure out what works best in your context.
Yeah.
We're not Elevation. We're not New Spring. They do amazing designs and things. We can use some of that stuff and some of those ideas, but be yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your, the new friendship with you. And I'm so glad that we had an appointment to meet in, the great city of Columbus at the Opera House. Yeah,
it was great. It was great. You need to come next year. He's already.
I do. Alan's already. We're already talking about next year with Alan. So it was a great first conference for him, and I hope that a lot of people come out next year. Well, man, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. It's nice talking to you.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
This week in the mailbag, I got a message from Barbara McKillop Barbara said, starting on Christmas Wow Factor now. Our sermon series is called Wish List. If you have any wow factors we could do or any ideas, I'm all ears. I appreciate you more than you know. Well, thank you, Barbara. Here are some ideas I had for this series for you. So, what if you asked your congregation on social media or through email leading up to this series their favorite things? Okay, so put it like this. If you had a wish list of your favorite candy, what would those things be? If you had a wish list of your favorite coffee, what would it be? How about gift cards? If you could get a gift card from anywhere, name your top 5 places that you would love to get a gift card from. How about colors? What are your favorite colors? And other things, okay? So ask people what their favorite things are. Then you're going to use those lists that you get off social media or through email in your worship experience. So you're gathering information weeks before, and then you're executing on that information during your series. So what if you put those lists everywhere? Here's what I mean. What if you put a wish list on the wall or on the mirror in the restrooms at your church, and you say your favorite mints or your favorite candy was, and you list out 3 of those and have bowls of those candies, okay? Or maybe you have that in the lobby as well, okay? Maybe a wish list in a frame on your coffee area station that says your favorite coffees were, and you list those coffees, and they're available for people to get and drink, okay? This is your wish list. This is your favorite things, okay? You can have those in the lobby, all right? So have wish lists everywhere. Then you're going to pivot, and then you're going to get serious. So your topic in your sermon or something in your room, or even as kind of an application piece, you can get serious. So my wish list or your wish list for your family this year, maybe this is in your worship guide or something like that. What is your wish list for your family this year? List 5 things that you would love to see happen. You would love to see God do in your family this year. Here's my wish list. Okay? How about wish list for your relationship with Jesus, your walk with Christ in the next year? List these 5, give them 5 blanks. Maybe every week of the series they have a new list that they need to fill out and pray over during the week. So if your series is called Wish List, hammer that theme as much as you possibly can. So make it super interactive. Go overboard on the theme. This is very applicable that you can take the idea of wish list and really, really expand it to everywhere. So that, again, it's one journey from the parking lot to the parking lot. So anything you can do to take the experience out of the room or from the moment they reach the parking lot to in the lobby, to in the room, to out of the room, to back out in the parking lot. Anything that you can do to create a very cohesive journey throughout that entire process, I want to encourage you to do that, okay? Hope these ideas get your mind moving. Barbara, thank you so much for the question. If you have a question for me or for our team, you can email me. You can find me on social media. You can call us, 910-849-1230, 910-849-1230. There are some days where people just call us up just to chat, and I love it. Our project manager, Shelby, will answer the phone, and if it's for me, I'll call you back, and I love spending my days chatting with you. In fact, I'm traveling more lately, and so I'll just spend my drive chatting with you, praying for you, and hearing what God's doing in your congregation, in your context. I love it. It fills my tank. So feel free to give us a call, even if it's just to chat. If you need prayer, if you need anything, we're your guide. We're your Yoda. Okay, we're coming right alongside you. You're the hero in your church by far. Okay, so think of it as Star Wars. You guys are Luke Skywalker. We're Yoda. All right, you guys are at the front of the show. You're at the front lines doing it week in, week out. We're just trying to come alongside you and help you with resources and training and media content to help your worship experience enhance and be better so that you can see life change. Okay, so that's what we're all about. So thank you so much for being on the journey with us. The direct URL for our podcast is makingsundayhappen.com. Lots of free resources for you there. Next week on the show, we'll continue this 2-part series on how to use print design to create a worshipful atmosphere. Next week, I'm talking with Will Gann from Bayside Community Church in Bradenton, Florida. So you'll kind of hear the different perspective. You heard from Lee Snow this week at a church of under 100 in weekly attendance. Then next week, you'll hear from Will on the same exact topic, but he comes at it from a church with over 10,000 people in weekly attendance. So I want you to see that contrast. All right, I believe in you guys. You're making a difference for the kingdom. Thank you so much for being with us each week. Thank you for listening and watching. Go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.